Hello there. I didn't see you there. Welcome to my Quipo presentation. Right here, may I introduce to you my Quipo. Alright, number one, we have the cortex. The cortex holds most of the memory in the brain. And the cortex is 80% of the brain's weight. This is very important because the brain obviously needs memory. And I chose this big, large yellow bead because it's, it's bright, it's yellow, and I feel as though the large size represents, like, how much memory it can hold. And, yeah, it's bright, and, it's very important. Alright, so right here is the limbic system, and that's where all the emotions are held. And it's very important to connect emotion with your memory. And so I chose this red bead because it could represent love and hate and jealousy and all these kinds of emotions. I feel, so to me that says emotions. Alright, and this bead, this decorative lovely bead right here, this represents novelty, and it's how the brain seeks novelty. And so I chose this decorative bead because, it's fancy looking and, it looks interesting. And so, let's create this learning process. So of course the brain needs memory, it needs to create memories in order to even learn. And of course it needs to create emotion and meaning to that memory in order for it to be important and stay. But also there's novelty. It needs to seek novelty in the classroom or in the subject in order to actually retain it. So let's say that you're a teacher, and your student just went to Disney World last weekend, and they're like, yeah, Disney! They're like, no, I don't care about your classroom that's all white. I don't want to be in here. I don't want to be learning about fractions. I want to be in Disneyland. That was so cool. Novelty, yeah. And then they're not in class. They're in Disney right now. So you, as a teacher, need to create an environment in which is vibrant and has posters, like fun, motivating, and vibrant posters, and have, like, in your subject incorporate, I don't know, activities that will be fun and interesting, and, arts and crafts that will be really cool for them to do, and just any sort of activity that will be fun for them that they can seek novelty in and be interested in your class. Alright, so right here we have the information processing model. Right here, this long bead represents all the senses. So, like sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. This is very important. Let me tell you why. This is the external environment that you are taking in as a human being. And this goes to your immediate memory right here. Immediate. Yes. Let's go. Alright, so in the immediate memory, it's like a clipboard. It holds maybe information before it gets shut out, like if it's not important, for maybe 30 seconds. And so in that 30 seconds, it needs to be going into its working memory, into the long-term memory, going through the storage and seeing if, they can find meaning in that. And if they can't, it's just going to go into the sensory output and it's gone. Yikes. Oh. Alright, so then, if it makes it through to the next round, it goes to the working memory. You see it has little waves, like it's working, it's moving about. Alright, so in the working memory, it's very important because this is where it's like processing it. It wants to go into the long-term storage, and it's going to look through its little cabinets, you see right there. And it's going to see if it can connect it to anything so that it can be used and become a memory. Alright, so then we're going to move to our long-term memory, and you see, as I said, it looks like little cabinets. Alright, so in the long-term memory, that's where, it's like looking through files, it's trying to search to see if this is important information to gather. And also, it's also trying to find self-concept, so if you have a positive emotion to this memory and see, so if you have a negative emotion, it's going to be like, yikes, out, sensory output. So there we are, but if they find a good memory, it has meaning to it, you're going to create a new thing and add on to it, and you're going to be able to create a new memory. And of course this relates to the learning process, because you've created if you're able to create new memories or not create new memories, and that's mostly what learning is. Alright, so right here we have the creating a network. So we have neuron A right here, it's a singular, I just chose yellow because it's by itself right now. So neuron A needs to connect with neuron A, B, C, and D. C and D if it wants to create a whole network. Alright, so this is them connecting together, neurons A and B, eventually C and D. And then in the end, they'll create a network. See, little hearts. That's why I chose it, because it looks like a little happy family network. Alright, so that means that this network, it could represent, this one could just be the scent of an apple. And so for the apple, they're like, yeah, this apple is tasty, so this has created the network for an apple. So this, in learning, for the learning process, this could be the one for addition. This could be the network for addition. Or anything for that matter. Alright, so then we move on to the prime times. This is prime time 1, and as you can see, this is the biggest speed. It's very important. Red, big, very important. Alright, so in prime time 1, which is like the first 20 minutes of class, is when the kids can retain, or students for that matter, can retain the most amount of information. In this first 20 minutes, you need, as a teacher, you need to teach the vital information that you're trying to get through. If you teach it during downtime, they're not going to take it in. They're not going to have it. They're not going to understand it. And so this is crucial that you get through this information. All right, so in the middle of class, you're like, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to be here. And this is called downtime. You see D for downtime. And in downtime, this is when you do worksheets, review for that, what you just learned. And so they do that for a while. But then at the end of class, their brains, they're back, they're ready. And this is, you see, it's slightly smaller than the other one because this is like, it's almost as, they're almost as focused as primetime 1, but not quite. So, and this is when it's closure, you review for, as a teacher, you review what you learned today and introduce kind of the new subject. Don't go into great detail because that's for next class. But this is when they're also going to be able to retain some information. So, of course, obviously that's very important as a teacher and in the learning process for children because they're not going to be able, and when they're younger, they can only retain like 3 to 5 minutes. So, even shorter amount of time, my elementary fellow ed students, yikes, whew, we have a rough time ahead of us. Alright, now let's go to confabulation. Alright, right, what you see right here, this is the original memory. So this represents, so I just chose pink because number 1 is my favorite color, and it reminds me this is the original thing. Plain, original, cool. Alright, so sometimes your brain isn't able to like completely take in everything that happened from a memory. So so this represents, this decorated B, this is the fabricated version of this memory. So let's say, you're a teacher and your student, like you're learning the differences between dividing and multiplying fractions, and they don't really remember that you're supposed to like switch the reciprocal, and then times that they don't remember that. And so you're like, oh, you're just being silly, and no, they're not. They totally missed it then, and that's what their brain honestly thinks it's right. It's not lying, they don't remember. And so, as a teacher, you need to find ways where you can just, you have to go back, review, be patient, and and it's not them lying, it's just the fabricated information that the brain creates. Your brain does it too. Alright, so right here we have past learning connecting to future learning. And you see I chose this orange bead because it's slightly duller than this red bead that represents the future adding on to like this past memory. So this past memory could be like when you're little, you learn the alphabet, right? You're in kindergarten, you're learning the alphabet, preschool, whatever. So yeah, we're learning the alphabet, and in the future, like, by like 2nd grade, we are pro at reading those picture books. So we took what we learned from the alphabet and those sounds, and we put it into reading. We've learned how to read. We've created this new thing. We've added on to this memory. See, we're brighter. We know this memory better. Cool. Alright, so now we're going to move to the left and right hemispheres. Alright, let's see. Right here we have the left and right hemisphere. This plain bead, there's two, they look almost exactly the same, but this one is, plain looking, and this one's bright blue. So this left hemisphere. This one is the one that it recognizes numbers and letters, all of that. So it is the one that's more literal, where it can, it knows, it's the mathematics part of the brain, it's like the actual motor skills, like actually doing the function. And so this is the corpus callosum. It's what separates the left and right hemisphere, and it looks like a little line that would separate, so that's why I chose it. And then this is the right hemisphere, and the right hemisphere is like the creative side of the brain, and it's the one that understands the content of like those numbers and letters and all of that. So it understands those. It can't recognize it, but it understands it, and it's like the creative part of the brain that's artsy and can do all of those things like reading and linguistic skills. It's wonderful. And so, the left side operates the right side, and the right side operates the left side. Crazy, right? And of course this, pertains to learning, because those who are, better with their left hemisphere, which is actually girls are more prone to the left hemisphere than guys. And so they're better at math and sciences, unlike girls who are better in, not girls, but sorry, the right hemisphere, which is better with art and, music and all of that, and drawing and beautiful things like that. Alright, so then we have this Y and this H, and this represents young, Y, young, and H, home. Alright, so this goes with learning a language, a secondary language, and reading. So at a young age, as a parent or guardian, you need to be teaching, and also as a teacher, of course, you need to be teaching those, like, a secondary language and a first language at a young age. As soon as they come out of the womb, you need to be talking to them. You need to be like, hey, language, and they'll be like, yeah, and eventually they'll be like talking up a storm to you. It may not make sense yet, but they're getting it. They're gonna get there. So at a young age, you need to introduce language. You can't introduce it when they're older. Like, for even in like that 11 months period and 12 months period, they need to be taught that language. All right, so it's very young, fine, young age, you need to get it going, you need to read to them, you need to introduce language. All right, so then we're at H, home. And this kind of pertains to reading. The mind isn't actually supposed to know how to read. We teach to read, we drill it to read, and at a young age you need to be reading to your kid, and also in school they're teaching them how to read, but they can't only do it at school. They can't just teach your child at school. You have to teach them at home. You need to teach them how to read. And this is going to help them in the future in all aspects, because everyone knows that reading is, part of schooling, and you can't even get through the basic, like past first grade without knowing how to read, right? So at home and at a young age you need to be introducing books, reading to them, have them read to you, everything. You need to have that done. All right, so now we're going to move to M. And this M represents three things. It represents music, mathematics, and movement. All right, so music is very, very important. Music, like, it helps with motor skills, it helps with linguistic skills, it helps with just functioning generally well, and it actually correlates directly with mathematics, because both music and mathematics, they take like patterns and geometry, because like if you're playing the guitar, for instance, you need to be able to know where your fingers go on the thing, and that's geometry. And patterns in the music, and fractions in the music. Crazy, so it's directly correlated. And movement. All right, so in the cerebellum, it's what controls the motor cortex, so that's very important. So movement, and it gets the blood flowing, the oxygen in the blood, and it gets you moving. It actually helps with your cognitive understanding. It helps you better understand concepts and come up with new ideas. It's great. So obviously, movement and music is going to help you in school. It's going to help you be able to be and more understanding of it, and help you with probably more subjects, and movement just gets your blood flowing. And it's really sad, because for the learning process, usually classrooms, they don't really involve movement, and it's just important to get your kids moving in the classroom. We have them walk around talking about the new activity or the new learning thing they learned in class. So to get them moving, just movement, music, anything that gets them going. That's what gets the kids rolling these days. Let's get to the next part. Foundation. Bloom's taxonomy. Let me introduce it to you. All right. Remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. All right. So that's what foundation is. We're a blank slate, but we have to move up on Bloom's taxonomy. So we have to remember that information. We have to understand it. We have to understand its content. We have to be able to apply it in a situation. We have to be able to